Hi, Nigel. It's great to have you with us today, and thank you for your time and for accepting my invite to participate in our global research. Before we start, maybe you should briefly introduce yourself, tell us about your background, your role at Google, etc.
Hey, always good to see you, my friend, and always good to see your smile. So thank you for the invite.
Thanks.
So a quick introduction for those that I've not come across or met before. Nigel Walsh, I lead insurance at Google Cloud in North America, looking after North America, Canada, LATAM. Been here about 2 years. Prior to that, I spent 5 years at Deloitte as a partner there, leading global future of insurance and global Insurtech, which was a super exciting space and where you and I started to have many, many interesting conversations and shared interests. And then prior to that, I was at Capgemini for 7 years, where I was doing large scale transformation for insurance companies, so core Guidewire, core Salesforce, and all that sort of good stuff. So I'm a technology nerd. I'm an insurance nerd. I just love this industry, and I think it's got a huge opportunity going forward that's massively underrepresented in many places outside of insurance. So my mission's always been, how do we make insurance lovable?
Yeah. So you're one of the key global players on this industry that everybody knows. And based on your perspective and knowledge and know-how, you know all the companies, you know the market globally, you've seen everything. And now via Google, you are connected to maybe 99% of all the companies in the world. So considering this information, maybe you can share with us about the major trends that you see for the insurance industry for the next years. I think this would be amazing.
Well, I'm flattered by your commentary. I definitely don't know all of them, but I do know lots of people like yourself that always, like me, always help join the dots and work out where and how we spend our time. The industry is going through a really interesting reflection point right now, and I have the great privilege of understanding and looking and working in the European market as well as now obviously the US market. And I think there's been some really interesting and fundamental differences between the two, specifically when it comes to things like digital maturity, purchasing channels, and so much more. So if I look at the European market and the UK specifically, the way in which we acquire, engage, how often we switch our loyalty to insurers is a very, very different debate to what I see in the US or Germany or elsewhere. So typically in the UK, you'd come into a price comparison website, you jump on, you put on your details, and dare I say, often we're considered fickle. It's price comparison at the end of the day. We're buying based on price. Right. We're not always comparing apples for apples. And as a net result, it's a race to zero often on what's my cheapest policy. And whilst it's convenient for the customer, by the way, the old version of that, and I'm old enough to remember this, was sitting down on a Saturday or Sunday with the yellow pages. Remember those big old books we all had?
Exactly.
Right? We're old enough for this. My kids aren't. But we'd sit there with the yellow pages and we'd call the numbers one by one and go through the call centers and get a quote. The PCWs over the last 20 years have just digitized that and made it really, really efficient. They are phenomenal at what they do. I love what you can do with those things. But I also think we've removed the value that you often get from insurance in those spaces. So I wonder what's going to happen on that. And there's been some regulation changes in the UK that people will be well aware of. It's also driven I would say in many cases, a lack of loyalty for the mass market because we'll switch very quickly and very often. The US, though, I find, this is my personal view, is completely opposite. The US is agent or broker driven with lots of loyalty. I've got friends that I've spoken to. I said, hey, how long have you been with your XYZ carrier? And they're like, oh, I've been there with 27 years. I'm like, wow, that's a long time. Why? Have you ever checked the price? Or I was chatting to a friend of mine or a colleague yesterday who said, I've been with this company for 20 years because they're great. And now I can't change because I've been there 20 years. Whereas in the UK, that would be a jump onto a comparison site and compare the rate and see if I can change it in a different way. the loyalty in the US is truly admirable. And I wonder how we try and get a common blend of those two things to say, how do we generate both loyalty and best value for customer? So I think getting back to your question about trends and what we're going to go and see, obviously the debate around embedded insurance, my children, you know, I keep saying that they'll never buy insurance in the same way that I have or that you have or our parents have. The whole debate around embedded and car ownership, asset ownership, and so much more is truly taking how and where we engage with insurers to a new level. So for 5 years, maybe longer, I've been talking about embedded insurance. The last 2 years, it's blown up into a huge market. And I think that's actually changed the Insurtech landscape quite considerably as well, because you've had companies go from, we're going to disrupt insurance, into let's become an MGA or an MGU and just go to D2C ourselves because working with partners is too slow. And I think that's gone in full circle now into actually, the only way we're going to do this successfully is by collaborating with people that own the customer, whether that's an insurer, a third party, whether it's an auto manufacturer, a house builder, or whoever it might be, or someone completely different, an airline or whatever it might be. So I think we've gone full circle from 5 or 7 years ago, let's disrupt the market, we're going to take out all the old guys, into, hey, that's really hard. These guys have been around for hundreds of years doing this. They know what they're doing. Underwriting, pricing, claims is a pretty specialized capability in an industry that doesn't actually engage with us much. So how do we work smarter, better together to get some of that value back to clients? So long answer, short question, but
yeah.
Embedded, customer engagement, who owns a customer, and so much more, I think is coming out quite quickly.
So this is fantastic, and I think the embedded part, which everybody's dealing with, I think it started, and I think it will continue through the cost of acquisition, which reduces significantly one of the biggest burdens of the direct-to-consumer insurance side, because in many cases, and even with Google AdWords, you can lose money, a lot of money, with the customer acquisition. And I think this is the part of what everybody understood, that the market hasn't changed dramatically, but the distribution channels should be changed and reflect to these pricing of customer acquisition costs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a cloud guy, so I can't comment on anything else. But
Yeah.
but I think people realize it's a harder industry to crack than they first thought. If you compare it to fintech, for example, or neobanks versus neo insurers, a neobank you would engage with on a daily or weekly basis.
Right.
But the engagement levels that you have on the insurance side are much less. But one point, and I've been banging on about this for quite a while. Embedded insurance, everyone's focused on the acquisition side. Hey, we can embed or partner with XYZ company to get different levels of distribution. Yes, of course you can. But put yourself in the customer's shoes. Imagine now you're an embedded customer because you rented a car from a hire car company and you've got 7 different policies for wheels, windshield, personal liability, accident from 7 different providers. And then God forbid you're in an accident. What's the customer experience to join up those 7 things going forward? So I actually think the debate around embedding on customer acquisition is relatively straightforward. And there's some great companies out there that are doing this already.
Right.
I think the flip side of it about being an embedded customer and dealing with service, MTAs, claims, no one's really thought that through as well as they've thought through the distribution side just yet. And I think that's where there's a great opportunity for people to go, we're thinking about the customer first, not the 7 products that are now embedded into that experience.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, that's for sure. By the way, how do you see the cyber insurance market for the upcoming years in terms of cloud and everything?
Cyber's interesting. I'm a big fan of the market in general. It's been talked about for years. There's a whole conversation that's been going on for a while now around silent cyber, so what's implicit versus explicit, and so much more. I have a view. I've written about this before about actually is a future of, back to my kids, right? I mean, will they own assets in the same way that we own assets, but they will own their identity. So will everyone end up with a personal cyber product from a personalized perspective? And then, of course, as you go into the SME or SMB and commercial space, this is a market that I think we're still getting to grips with. And whilst it's more and more understood, I think the opportunity here for, again, collaboration between technology, insurer, and other participants is going to be gargantuan going forward. So it's a market that's just going to grow and grow without question over the coming months and years.
Yeah, this is right. We'll take it offline. Okay, Nigel, thank you very much for your time. It was a great pleasure to have you on board with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Good to see you.